somebody who have out to formally welcome you, and I invite Kun Gayatri and Kun Eko Mariadi, Kun Gayatri from SIPA and Mr. Eko Mariadi.
Ya, kita persilakan Mas Item dan Gaya untuk ke depan untuk memberikan speech secara pembukaan secara formal. Jadi kita nggak formal ya Pak?
Ya. Oke.
I feel like some kind of a talk show now. Like we are going to start to sing after this. Good morning, Mingalaba, Sawadika. Welcome to everyone. My name is Gayatri. I'm the Executive Director of the Southeast Asian Press Alliance. For some of you who don't know, it is a regional network of media freedom advocates in Southeast Asia, of which AJI is a founding member, and another organization in Indonesia is ISAI. So these are the two founding members of SIPA. So we're very happy to be here, especially because of the coming elections this year. In Southeast Asia, we see Indonesia as a leader in terms of democratic changes, together with Thailand and Philippines. But we also understand there are many challenges ahead for the media. So we take this opportunity from SIPA to bring together the media from Indonesia and some friends from Cambodia, from Malaysia, and also from Myanmar. Some who have experienced elections to share with you their stories, and some who are also going towards elections. I just want to say one thing is that many of you may have attended a lot of programs, but I think what is important for us from SIPA is that we really believe press freedom as being one of the key issues and key rights for the media, and it's in that environment we encourage everyone to have open and critical discussion. So on behalf of SIPA, I thank you very much for participating, sharing your views, to be open to discussions, and I wish you a good 2.5 days or 3 days together here. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Pak Gaya. Since you represent the regional, so I will represent the national wide. Selamat pagi semuanya, teman-teman. Salam sejahtera untuk kita semua. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Perkenalkan, nama saya Eko Mariadi. Saya the Ketua Umum atau Presiden Aliansi Jurnalis Independen. Hari ini kami mengundang banyak anggota AJI dan juga wartawan yang akan mendiskusikan tentang bagaimana kita meliput pemilu. Kebetulan pada bulan April dan Juli besok kita akan menyelenggarakan pemilu nasional, pemilu legislatif dan pemilu presiden. Nah, saya sengaja mengundang teman-teman yang sudah senior, terutama dari 5 koordinator wilayah di mana AJI berdiri. Ada dari Sumatera, dari Sulawesi, Papua, kemudian juga dari Jawa. Kita ingin share, termasuk juga NTB dan Bali ya. Kita ingin share sama-sama bagaimana kita menginisiasi sebuah peliputan yang beretika dan juga memberikan informasi yang bermanfaat kepada publik. Saya kira ini saatnya teman-teman untuk memberikan pengalamannya kepada teman-teman di negara lain, terutama yang masih menghadapi situasi demokrasi yang belum sematang kita. Teman-teman dari Myanmar, dari Kamboja, ya kan. Mungkin nanti kita bisa sama-sama bantu dan diskusi tentang bagaimana memperoleh demokrasi dan kemudian menjaga kebebasan pers secara beretika dan bermartabat. Gitu. Jadi saya ingin mengucapkan selamat datang kepada semua teman-teman. I will also want to welcome you on behalf of the Alliance of Independent Journalists to all participants. Let's have a good discussion, and I hope we will approach our goals in making a preparation to make a report on election. So thank you for SIPA for facilitating us to be our local partner. And I hope you enjoy Jakarta and the discussion. Thank you.
Session, we want to start the discussions looking at some of the experiences in countries that have had elections in the last year, but also trying to contextualize what is expected in Indonesia. Because we have a lot of time, I think that I will not be so harsh on the panelists to give you a bit more flexibility to share. I just wanted to start by saying, before we invite the panelists, that at the UN level, there is a special mechanism which is called the Special Rapporteur. I think many of you know there is a Special Rapporteur on freedom of expression and opinion. Now this rapporteur, one of the main tasks that he or she has is to report annually to the Human Rights Council on selected issues on freedom of expression. The second is to make a visit to the country to have to look at the situation of freedom of expression and make an official report. Unfortunately, despite Indonesian government saying, yes, we will invite the Special Rapporteur, they have not done it for many reasons, which is really unfortunate, because I think it would have been a good opportunity to highlight the strengths of the freedom of expression in Indonesia, but also to highlight where the challenges are. For example, in situation of Papua, key threats to freedom of expression in the area of religious expression or minority rights, and also in terms of impunity in killing of journalists. So it's really unfortunate that the invitation did not go through. The second thing, the first one that I mentioned in terms of the report was that this coming June, the report of the Special Rapporteur is going to be on political electoral communication. So the focus in June is about the access of citizens to information, the role of the media, the ownership structures of media, whether they actually allow diversity of views, plurality of views, and also the kinds of information that the media puts out to the public. So I think it's very relevant, given the experiences we've had in the region and also with this report, to look at how both the media and the public have used information or produced information. So that's one of the contexts that I think is important for us. We had a consultation with the Special Rapporteur in November, and he had gathered information and feedback about experiences in Asia. I hope that he will highlight some of the challenges within Southeast Asia in his report in June. So from SIPA's point of view, we will try to share the report once it's out, so that's going to be in June. But in the meantime, so let's hear what happened in this region. Now, Malaysia had elections, its 13th general elections in May 2013. And in Cambodia, it was in July. There are actually some similarities, even though they are quite different countries. For example, the growth or the growing role of the opposition coalition. In both countries, the main party has been a dominant party for too long. But they are now seeing the growing presence and strength of the opposition. And the second thing that I think is also interesting is the role of social media. In both countries, actually showing how it has had some kind of impact, particularly with the young voters. Now, this is something I just observed, but I hope that our panelists will be able to share. So let me start by inviting Tessa. Tessa works with the University of Nottingham, Malaysia, and is director for Director for the Center for the Study of Communications and Culture. The university was involved in a very large scale in doing the monitoring, media monitoring of the elections, and Tessa is representing the Center for Independent Journalism, which kickstarted the project, but I think benefited a lot from the community of academics and researchers doing really, really tedious levels of monitoring. Many of us in Malaysia think that when you have to monitor the media, you will end up being very sick. because the media is extremely partisan to the dominant party. And if you read and watch, you really become sick at the end of the day. And I'm very, very biased when I say that. So for a very objective view and observation from Malaysia, Tessa, would you share with us the findings from the research? So from 15 minutes, you've been given now about 20 minutes.
Okay.
Just because we have a lot of time now. Yeah.
All right. Thank you for having me. Please shout out if I forget to hold the microphone too close to my face, because I have a tendency to drop it. I'm Tessa, and what I'm talking about today is this project that our centre did in collaboration with the Centre for Independent Journalism. So it was a dual project having an advocacy function that was kind of the remit of the CIJ, and then an academic function as well. So we're kind of both mutually benefiting from that in terms of having shared goals in terms of the advocacy, and the hope was, and I think that it did turn out this way, that having kind of some academic rigour involved with the methodology helped to make the findings a bit more legitimate and a bit harder to attack, because it is very common for findings that show governmental power or criticise governmental power to be attacked in Malaysia. I just want to start with a quote which I think links in pretty strongly with the keynote talk that we just had. If people use the mass media to inform themselves about their society and about the performance of their politicians, and if they use this information to direct their political choices and participation, then inadequate or inaccurate information is liable to result in misconceived political acts. So basically uninformed, what we might call incorrect and possibly illegitimate voting patterns due to a lack of provision of quality information. The interpretive framework, or the context for this study overall, is an understanding or a belief that politics, particularly in kind of modern society, is a very heavily mediated process. Politics doesn't occur anymore without the media, and you could argue that it happens very much within the media. We don't often talk to our politicians face to face. Most of the information that we receive and the communication that we have with political representatives is through the media. So they're an incredibly important platform within which politics occurs. It's also kind of working on the norms associated with, or the discourses associated with professional journalism, to do with issues of objectivity, balance, free and fair media information provision. In the local context, which Gayatri hinted at a bit, is the very embedded systems of political economic control of the media in Malaysia. The current government, Barisan Nasional, have been in power for, I think it's 57 years this year. Through that time, through the use of regulations such as the Printing Presses and Publications Act, the Sedition Act, and other bits of legislation, they've basically built up a system in which the majority of the offline media are controlled by the government. They're either owned directly by the coalition, by parties within the governing coalition, or they fall under the kind of ideological purview of those parties in different ways. The only space in Malaysia for kind of unhindered or mostly unhindered media to be built and maintained is online, although that is sometimes taken too much for granted, I think, in Malaysia, which I'll discuss a little bit closer to the end of the presentation. So the problem, or one of the things that I often see happening in Malaysia, is people getting very angry at journalists. Because they don't think journalists are doing their job. They put the blame on the journalists, which I think is unfair. It's easy to do because everyone is looking for someone to blame when they're unhappy about a situation. But I think what's often not remembered enough is that journalists are doing a job. They're making a living as well as doing a very important job. They're in an incredibly difficult situation in Malaysia where if they kind of step out of line, they're likely to lose their jobs or face some kind of flack. So it's looking at that broader context of that structural control and the kind of socialisation and pressures it puts on journalists working within that system. The methodology that we used, a lot of the content analysis that's been done in Malaysia before has been done looking at the article level. It'll be an instance of reading a lot of different articles, making notes or recording data on who is discussed in those articles, how they're discussed, which parties are given coverage, which ones aren't. But what we did this time was take a sentence level approach. So basically going through every article that was analysed within the study, sentence by sentence, and recording the data within those sentences. Part of it was to do with the size of the project and the fact that we had a huge team of about 70 research assistants or 70 coders. It allows a much kind of more straightforward and much more detailed coding guide or methodology to be taught to those coders rather than them kind of making what are often quite subjective judgments at the article level. And it gives more detail in terms of the results that we got. So the coding matrix that we applied to the analysis, to the body of data, was 21 categories in total, with operators within those categories. But the most important 3 categories was that of the parties and coalitions discussed, the politicians and political figures mentioned, and also the politicians and political figures who were used as sources. So within those 3 categories, we had a range of operators, the operators being the different parties or the different politicians. The stories that we coded were just within the Malaysian news sections of the newspapers, including the front page, and the only kind of opinion material that we included were the paper's editorials, if they had editorials. We also looked at a couple of online media, and we took the data, or kind of the snapshot of the data that we were going to look at from them at 8 PM every day to try and have some consistency. And we also looked at the television news broadcasts and generally defined articles as if they were 1/3 or more about the election, then we defined them as an election article and thus something that we'd look at, or if they were kind of very much framed. Going on, thank you. If they were very much framed kind of as something to do with the election. We looked at a month worth of data, so we coded these different media over a period of 31 days. We were originally looking at 29 different media. One of them was a Tamil newspaper, but because we wanted to look at 2 Tamil newspapers, but because we only ended up getting 1, that's essentially been dropped off because a sample of 1 within one language group is not really enough to start making very good judgments or generalizations. Ended up with 17,000 different articles that were analysed and over 450,000 data points which were extracted from those articles. So we're doing the sentence level analysis, identifying the categories and the operators discussed in these sentences, and also particularly when we're looking at the politicians and the parties mentioned, how they were discussed. So were they discussed in a positive way or a negative way? Were they presented in a neutral way with neutral language? Were they attacked or were they attacking someone else? A little bit more detail about these tonal categories or tonal judgments that we made. They were determined based on matching each reference, so each category plus operator, say a certain politician, to a media frame or frames that was constructed using kind of identifiable linguistic data. So it's using emotive, descriptive, subjective language within the media report or within the article to impose a certain frame on the person or the party being discussed. So we wanted to ensure it was as much as possible based on the actual data rather than on coder opinion. We wanted to kind of weed out as much subjectivity as possible. So coders were trained to code as neutral whenever they were unsure and to only kind of code some kind of tone when there was very clear data for some kind of spin being put on it. An example of something that therefore wasn't captured by our methodology and kind of to show that it's a very conservative estimate of bias that we've come up with. The idea of hudud law is a big issue in Malaysia. Within much of the media, the government-owned media, any discussion of hudud law within the context is understood as inherently negative because it's a smear tactic that's being used essentially to demonise one of the opposition parties, PAS. Because a lot of Malaysians, when they read anything about hudud law in the mainstream media, just know that it's a criticism of it. If they're talking about PAS wanting to impose hudud law, everyone who's reading it understands that that's a criticism. Often there isn't any necessarily kind of core language used to identify it. It's not saying something as simplistic as hudud is bad. Therefore, because that linguistic data was lacking there, a lot of the discussion of hudud wasn't captured by our methodology. So again, it's a very conservative estimate of bias. To outline the difference a little bit with these kind of positive, negative, attacked things, the political parties and coalitions and the mentions of politicians or political figures, those parties and those politicians can be attacked by sources. And they also can be covered positively, negatively, or neutrally by the media themselves. Sources, politicians and political figures who are functioning as sources within the media, can perform attacks, or they can speak neutrally. So there are different kind of tonal captures for each of those different categories within the data that we analysed. So just some examples to make that a bit more clear. In the first sentence, Prime Minister and Barisan National leader Najib Razak said that Pakatan Rakyat leader Anwar Ibrahim is a liar and cannot be trusted. So there's one mention of Najib, there's one mention of Anwar. Najib is attacking, Anwar is being attacked, and there are party mentions for two of the parties. The next sentence, Barisan National's recent sex video smear campaign against PAS is a sign of desperation. There are two mentions of the parties, Barisan Nasional and PAS. Barisan Nasional is being discussed in a negative way. Sign of desperation is the negative language there, while PAS is being discussed in a neutral way. So that kind of shows the difference between those attacks and the positive, negative thing that the media are doing as opposed to what sources are doing. So these are the range of media that we covered. Hopefully you can read that, and it's in your folders as well. We covered them across 3 different languages, minus Tamil, so English, Bahasa Malaysia, and Mandarin. And we looked at newspapers in Peninsular Malaysia and in East Malaysia. We looked at television, online media, and we also looked at the state newswire, Bernama, which hasn't been monitored previously. These are the different sample sizes for the different, if we go back to this, we can kind of see the matrix forming different groups. So there are 3 Peninsular English newspapers. If we look at the different sample sizes for them, what was kind of interesting at kind of a first glance here, and which I was actually initially really worried about because I thought that maybe we'd done something wrong or the coders had done something wrong, but I've seen it happen again and again in similar studies in Malaysia, is that the print media in Mandarin generate much larger sample sizes than any of the other media. There seems to be a lot more data packed into the Mandarin newspapers, and they tend to have a lot more shorter stories, kind of concise, shorter stories, which are packing in more data than some of the longer form stories in English and Bahasa. So the first information that I'm showing you here is looking at the volume of coverage that was dedicated to different political parties and coalitions. So what's being shown there is a ratio comparing Barisan Nasional, the government, to the opposition, Pakatan Rakyat. The ratios which are in green are where it was relatively equal. We can't expect it to be 1-to-1. Kind of journalism and media isn't that exact of a science, but I would like to see them being relatively equal, particularly considering the fact that the results of the election, Pakatan Rakyat won the popular vote. It was around 51% to 47%. Barisan Nasional is still in power due to kind of electoral boundary issues. If we look at the ones that are in dark blue on that chart, so it's Bernama, the state newswire, English television, Bahasa Malaysia television, Mandarin television, East Malaysia print English, East Malaysia print Bahasa Malaysia, they are all skewed towards significantly more coverage of the government than of the opposition. Interestingly, the Peninsular print media, Peninsular newspapers in Bahasa Malaysia, gave significantly more coverage to the opposition, which was very surprising when we first saw that figure. But when we start putting that together with tonal information, it becomes kind of a bit more self-explanatory about what's going on. Not all coverage is necessarily good coverage. So if we look at the tone of coverage of these political parties and coalitions, again, we've got the tones across the top, so positive tone in that first set of 2 columns, then neutral tone, then negative tone, then attacks. So if we take the first row going across, which is looking at the coverage within Bernama, in Bernama, every time Barisan Nasional got 1 positive mention within the state newswire, Bernama, the opposition got 0.045 positive mentions. So that's a fairly strong discrepancy in terms of the ratio. If we go across to the negative mentions, every time Barisan Nasional got 1 negative mention in Bernama, the opposition got 3.6 negative mentions. So again, there's fairly large systematic discrepancies in terms of the way that these different sides of the political spectrum are being covered. What has been done in this chart is that within each tonal column, positive, neutral, negative and attacked, the top 5 most unequal ratios have been shaded. So in each set of 2 columns, the top 5 most unequal ratios between the coverage have been shaded, and then that's been extrapolated across, basically to show who are the repeat offenders in terms of there being a real lack of balance in their coverage of the political parties. And what we see happening is that the only media which are consistently not at fault in terms of providing unbalanced coverage or biased coverage is the Peninsular print Mandarin media, so the Mandarin newspapers in Peninsular Malaysia, the East Malaysia, so Sabah and Sarawak, Mandarin newspapers, and online English and online Bahasa, which is immediately very interesting because the online media are the only real kind of free space, and the Mandarin media have somewhat of an advantage in terms of escaping control and kind of ongoing flack, I guess, by dint of the language that they're operating in. They're harder for the government to keep an eye on in many respects, and they're also not really seen as the government's main vote bank, especially after the last election. If we look at the kind of graphs that are generated by these different tonal trends, we can see what is kind of a very distinct arrowhead shape emerging when we look at the more biased or unbalanced media, where there's very high kind of negative and attacking coverage of the opposition and very high positive or neutral coverage of the government. In the more balanced media, it's a much flatter or much less distinctively shaped graph. Yeah, 5 minutes. Cool. Okay. If we look at the politicians and political figures, we see the same thing happening again. Interestingly, the Peninsular newspapers in English and Bahasa Malaysia give relatively more coverage to the opposition. The numbers in blue are where there's more coverage to the government, and the green ones are again more balanced, and again we can see that it's the Mandarin and online media that are giving the more balanced volumes of coverage. And with the tone of coverage at the political figure level, we see exactly the same repeat offenders again. It's the Mandarin newspapers and the online media that are providing the balanced coverage, and there are varying amounts of bias in the rest of the media, which tend to be the government-controlled media, some much worse than others. And again, the different shapes emerging when we graph those findings. The other really interesting thing was looking at who is used as sources. So the only publication, or the only publication group that used opposition politicians as sources more than government sources was the online English media. Everyone else was using governmental sources at much higher rates than opposition sources, with it sometimes kind of getting into the realms of ridiculousness. So Bernama used every time they used a governmental source, they used an opposition source less than 0.5% of the time. Yeah, so there's huge ratio discrepancies there. And we can see that again in the graphs. looking at Barisan Nasional, Pakatan Rakyat, and then independent figures being used as sources. It's very even in the online English graph. In Bernama, the opposition are given hardly any chances to speak or to be used as sources. The government are given a huge number of chances, and independent and other sources are also used a lot. Another way in which this is kind of a conservative estimate is that we excluded the Election Commission from being linked with either political party. They are kind of theoretically independent. In practice, they come under the Prime Minister's office and are basically a tool of the government, of Barisan Nasional. So if we'd included them as being part of Barisan Nasional, these skews would be even more pronounced. A lot of the independent sources in there are the Election Commission. So, the overall finding, and this, don't think it surprised anybody who kind of has constant contact with the Malaysian media, is that the media in Malaysia are functioning overall as running dogs much more than they're operating as watchdogs. There's a huge amount of governmental control through both political mechanisms and economic mechanisms, and anyone who relied on English language or Bahasa Malaysia language newspapers and television for their primary sources of information was not getting a good range or a quality range of information on their political landscape and on their political representatives. This is important, particularly once we look at the urban-rural divides in Malaysia. That top image shows the different electorates that were won in Malaysia at the state level. I'm pretty sure that one is. No, it won't be. That will be the... Yeah. Anyway, what we can see emerging there, the dark blue hexagons are votes for the government. The red, light blue and green hexagons are votes for the three parties in the opposition coalition. And what we can start seeing in that graph is huge clusters of opposition votes around the urban centres, both in Peninsular Malaysia and in Sabah and Sarawak. And the only place that is really disrupted is in the northeast coast of Malaysia, where PAS, one of the Islamic opposition parties, has got a really strong hold. And what's interesting about PAS is that even though there may not be strong internet access in that kind of more rural area of Malaysia, their offline campaigns were very strongly based on memes, very similar to the way that kind of online social media campaigns can be run. I drove up and down that coast immediately after the election, and every PAS mosque had a tank or an aeroplane built out of flags. So it's like this weird kind of offline reproduction of campaign memes around the mosques. Only around 60% of Malaysians are online, and those Malaysians tend to be clustered in these much more urban areas. And what we saw emerging in the voting patterns after GE13 was that those urban Malaysians who have a much higher access or a much better access to a wide range of critical media information are voting for the opposition, whereas it's kind of the rural heartlands which don't have as much internet penetration in many instances remain kind of supportive of the government. Wrap it up? Yep. The other thing that people have kind of said as in response to this, and this is just kind of by way of wrapping up the argument, is that social networking and the party papers, what does it matter that the government control all the newspapers or the television stations? We've got social networks now, the opposition have their party newspapers. The party newspapers are only allowed to be sold in certain places, and they're only meant to be sold to party members, so they really don't compare when we compare them to mainstream newspapers or television. And social networking also tends to be very much responsive to what we can talk about as the mainstream media or traditional journalism. A lot of the online discussion in social media about the election was in response to articles produced by journalists in the online media or in the newspapers. So there's a very reactive component to it. The danger as well with social media and with the online realm in general is this idea of cyber balkanization or the splinter net, where different groups of political supporters pull away from one another and don't engage with one another. I think that there's a real need, and it's one of the core kind of values of traditional journalism, is to provide a space where people with different opinions can come together and discuss their differences, engage with these kind of core bits of information in a way that doesn't promote them pulling apart from one another. And looking at what's happening in Malaysia at the moment, the last thing Malaysia needs is more differentiation and more divides within society. If we look at the online media, and this is kind of the last point that I'll make, Malaysia Kini is usually the top news site in Malaysia, but all of the existing government papers also have news sites, and as of January this year, Sinar Harian, which is one of the government-controlled papers, was the top news website in Malaysia. So the argument that the opposition control the online sphere is not accurate by any means, and is likely to become less accurate. Barisan Nasional know that the online space is where the opposition kind of have some space to operate. They've done things like poached most of the editorial and journalists from the Malaysian Insider, which was another important kind of independent online space in Malaysia, and have shifted them to the online site, the Malay Mail.
Whether which group they should give license of the frequency, or another group maybe you request for the license, they say no, finish like frequency, we have no more frequency. But when their affiliate group come back later, yes, you get another one. So that's why the minister is equal ruling party agent. So the way they mediate without law, that's why they try to verify us. That's why we think that should reform in this media, and the reform maybe abolish the Ministry of Information and set up the new independent body who manage this broadcasting regulation, and we should have a broadcasting law actually. And but very fun in Cambodia, funny, they don't like to have broadcasting law, but they want to have cyber law now. Why? Because they found out the social media and online media become more attractive and in favor to opposition. So that's why they not easy to control. That's why they want control. So they try the way the work is how to control. So the regulation is not really, sometimes it's not give freedom, fair distribution of the media, but sometimes they use them as to control, like cyber law. So that's why we are protest. We say that no, Cambodia no need cyber law, and otherwise it's really affect the negative effect on the social media and affect the freedom of the opinion. And regarding the why the government always not accept our opinion and our statement. Yeah, the government is Cambodia. The government is a ruling party, same. And when we issue any critical statement to them, they always reject. And even sometimes they sue us to the court, say that we defame, we insult, we incite. So this become like a very popular action taken by the government in the court. So that's why when we produce opinion or the statement, we have to make sure that it have evidence and fact. And the way we provide is not only negative, but also positive and negative. What any improvement, what is not improvement, and some negative. So we used to do that. For example, regarding the sometimes when we provide even a fact or evidence, they also unhappy. They really want to ask to delete the fact, this evidence, in order to use the positive opinion to support the government. But we cannot do that. We have to provide the truth, what happened. Like recently, her question on the indelible ink. We found out that indelible ink on the finger can be removed easily by the simple liquid. And this process is not secret process, it's a public process that tested by the National Election Commission, a committee. So conference staff joined this test, and we did that. We found out that this indelible ink cannot guarantee and then can be removed. And we have evidence, all evidence, since the beginning of test and after the post test. And even we have this full of evidence, they reject, and even they want to bring me to the court also, to the National Assembly to question. But I really need to go. I say that I have all documents. It's an official test. I wait for them to ask me to go to the National Assembly. They even asked me to answer to the National Assembly why I provide this fair evidence. But we have proof. We have evidence. So we're not afraid to show the evidence. So finally, they not call me. Okay.
Can you talk about the ownership?
I think we will have a session on laws later in the workshop. But you just mentioned the Crest Council. Let me just say that as one of the state regulators, independent state bodies regulating the media, I think the Broadcasting Commission has a much bigger challenge because of course it deals with big capitals. It is the Press Council, I think, that is gaining recognition for instilling in the public an understanding that everyone needs a credible media. And I think that is what the Press Council can be recognized for through its facilitation of dispute settlements all around the country. And we in the media are very embarrassed when we know that yes, that media did a dreadful mistake and it's not owning it. So it's educating the public and the media through its facilitation of dispute mechanisms, trying its best and to encourage us in the media to have, encouraging the public and the media to have settlement outside the court of law, having the courts as the very last resort. Jupriati here from the Makassar TV was also accompanied by the Press Council in his dispute. And also, instilling the understanding that everyone needs credible media, so it will stand up for the people who complain against the media. And when we expect the Press Council should defend us, no, we have seen it's not always the case. They defend the people who do complain against the media, and they point out when the media is right. So I think they have the lesser challenge, not just facing the big capital of the broadcasters, but they have succeeded so far in bringing that wide understanding that yes, people hate the media when we make mistakes, that their letters to the editor will not make significant impact. They have been very angry at the media with the so-called power of the media, but they have also seen the media being placed in the wrong by the Press Council.
I will end here because we will be breaking for lunch soon. I will not try to summarize, but I think that there are some key issues also in relation to the questions raised in the issue of the transparency of ownership. I think knowing who really is behind where the capital is coming from, I think that's an issue that maybe within Southeast Asia we need to look at a little bit more in terms of the transparency. And I think coming back also to the keynote address about the trust being the key to a lot of things. So even where you have councils, the Press Council or the Commission, or even the election body itself, is there credibility to those institutions in order to regulate, not necessarily legislatively, but I think in terms of self-regulation. Just a quick wrap up from the Malaysian side, just because I have very personal interest there. While a lot of media may not have covered the monitoring report, but I think, Tessa, it was very important that it was a key submission to the inquiry, the public inquiry that was held regarding the election sort of offences. So it was a public initiative, a civil society initiative, and this was one of the main submissions, and I think that is really a major development there. And also I think that when there is evidence-based information, no matter where, in which country, I think the chances of long-term advocacy become stronger. So while now you don't see reactions maybe towards the initiatives by the Confrel, but you know that it feeds into the public advocacy. So I think that that is where evidence-based information or consistent initiatives are actually playing a role in either supporting the media or creating awareness about the media. I hope that that is a fair sort of summing up of the points. Thank you very much for participating in this session. Thank you very much to all the panelists for the wonderful presentations. So we will break for lunch. I will just hand over the mic back to Vishnu to give some updates and logistics information. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Kaya, Upanya, Tisa, and Ati. Yeah, I think good for us to give more applause to them for this. And now our time to have lunch, and we will come again here at what is it? Yeah, at 1:30. That means we have a long time of break, and our lunch is first floor. Yeah, we could gather there. Yeah, the same place with the breakfast. Oke, sampai ketemu teman-teman semua. Kita istirahat makan siang. Thank you. Please. Thank you, Kaya. That make our session right now warm and even maybe hot. Okay, I invite Mr. Item Eko Mariadi, also two speakers, Kun Ted Chayong and Ibu Mbak Uni. Mbak Uni itu sudah Mbak ya? Mbak Uni, please. Silahkan Mas Eko.
Oke. Ladies and gentlemen, Bapak Ibu sekalian, I wish you very good afternoon. Hopefully after having lunch, we're all ready to roll and share our ideas in the second session of our discussion. And before we start, I'd like to introduce a little bit about the two speakers besides me. On my left side is, we call it Ibu Uni Lubis. She's the managing editor of Antv, one of the private TV station in Indonesia nationally, and also editor-in-chief for the FIFA News under the group FIFA Co-ID. And then on my right side, there is also another editor-in-chief who lead The Nation, one of the prominent newspaper nationally in Thailand, based in Bangkok, of course. It's Mr. Ted Chayong. He's the group editor-in-chief for the Nation Multimedia Group, and he also the Internews Media Leadership Award winner in 2009. So to make this time short, I will invite the speakers to start their presentation, as we will discuss a little bit.
Unprecedented, and the problem is that I don't have any answer as to what will happen next. And this is the question that is in the mind of everyone in Thailand at the moment. In every news meeting, every morning that I preside over, myself and my editors would glance around and ask our editors, our journalists, does anyone have any idea what will happen today? We are living on a day-to-day basis now because the situation is so complex and so challenging that we don't know what will happen next. But the tragedy is that all signs are now pointing to a very dangerous trend. In fact, the anti-government demonstrations that have been going on for the past 4 months have been largely peaceful, despite all the headlines that you might have read from Jakarta, from KL. But violence did happen, over the past few days, and we foresee the possibility of more violence coming ahead, especially after the pro-government movements have started drumming up, support among themselves and to mobilize supporters, to confront the anti-government protesters. Now, I have to say that with all this, Thailand is a deeply divided country. When I say divided, I don't mean that people just have different political opinions and have some decent arguments over them, which is something normal. But the division is so deep that people just don't tolerate views that are opposite what they believe. It's quite evident even at the family level. Parents, sitting, at their dinner table, would argue over, their political preferences, and it's quite common that they will end up, fighting each other. Parents don't talk to their children because they have different political affiliations, and in newsroom are no exception. Every day, when I preside over the daily news meeting, I have to sort of make sure that everybody understands the basic function of journalists. It's quite common these days that journalists think that they are compelled by the circumstances to take sides. It's quite common also that there are some prominent journalists have taken to the stage, to make speeches on behalf of either side of the political divide, which is something that we haven't witnessed before. Now, in the past, whenever there were crises, they would be resolved either by themselves or by some interfering figures, like it happened a few times before. We used to have the military, which would step in and resolve the crisis unconstitutionally, of course. And the monarchy also played a big role. And sometimes, if we were lucky enough, the crisis would be resolved by elections. But this time around, there seem to be no figures, no factors that are seen as the possible solution to this crisis. It could be a blessing in disguise anyway that the military are not in a position to intervene. Had this situation happened, say 10, 15 years ago, there would have been a coup already. Even before the whole thing escalated. But even the armed forces are not in position to really make changes the way they would have wanted. For me, I think this in a small positive way, it could be a plus factor in all this crisis. And of course, everybody had been looking up to the monarchy to step in and diffuse the potentially explosive situation as they used to do in the past. But no more. I don't think he's in a position to really make any major difference, because the monarchy itself has been, for some reason, been dragged into this whole thing too, and the institution may not be in the position as expected as it used to be in the past. There are many reasons for that, but I'll leave that to further debate. No, when I talk about newsrooms in this context, I think it's a problem in every newsroom now in Thailand. Editors and journalists may have different opinions as to what is happening. I'll give you a very good example of what I myself encountered both recently at The Nation and 5 years back when I was managing director of Thai Public Broadcasting Service, Thailand First Public Broadcaster. I went there in 2008 at the height of another political crisis. And to my surprise, more than half of the people in the newsroom were so-called pro-red. Of course, you know, red, colors, and what color politics in Thailand is all about. Red and yellow, so just to make it simple to you. But half of the people in the newsroom were pro-red, were pro-government. So my first challenge as the managing director was to make sure that they don't allow their political preference to interfere with their journalistic work. It wasn't easy because the broadcaster, the TV station, was previously owned by the family of former Prime Minister Thaksin Shinawatra before it was nationalized and to turn into a public broadcaster. So it was a very tiring task indeed in trying to make sure every day that some biased reports get on the air, and that reporting is done professionally and objectively. And it was quite annoying to see journalists huddling in one corner watching the pro-red satellite TV from morning to dusk. And just imagine what kind of a thinking they would have when it comes to do reporting as their job requires them to do. With this kind of mentality, it's not easy to expect the public to have faith in the broadcaster. No, but my efforts did work out, and I eventually had to sit down and talk to them openly and tell them that at the end of the day, our job as journalists is not to be part of the conflict, but to report the events as truthfully as possible, and must not allow our political biases to creep into stories or news stories that we report. When I went back to The Nation last year, the situation was opposite. I would say that there are large number of journalists in The Nation newsroom that are openly sympathetic with the anti-government movement at the moment. And again, I have to do my job, but in a reverse situation. So every morning now I have to make sure that I pinpoint things that I see are not professional enough in the way they get reported in the paper. Sometimes the headlines are too sympathetic with the anti-government protests, and sometimes the contents of the stories are skewed too much in favor of the anti-government movement. So this is, I believe that this is a situation that is common in all newsrooms in Thailand at the moment, and I'm sure that all the editors must be struggling like me to make sure that the journalists will do their job properly. But that's one side of the story. That is mainstream media, which I think by and large are trying hard to be a voice of reason. Not very successfully, because within the present context of events, it's not easy to be objective, to be professional, and then get people to listen to you. Things would have been different 10, 15 years ago when there was no satellite TV. social media were not even around yet. But things have been made worse by the fact that each of the opposing political sides have their own mouthpieces in the form of satellite television. The use of hate speech has been prevalent in the past few years. And using these satellite mouthpieces have been very effective in a very negative way in dividing the society. So don't be surprised that you go into any home. You may have the father watching the satellite channel that supports the former Prime Minister Thaksin, and the children watching the other channel supporting the anti-Thaksin movement. Newsroom also, that's what's happening. And what worries me and most of the mainstream media, the journalists, is that gradually, the mainstream media being, I would say, literally marginalized by this segmentation, the fragmentation of the media, and the voices that are making more impact happens to be the voices that are extreme, the voices that feel with hate speech. Now, for those who may not be familiar with the cause of the events going on in Thailand right now, I would like to say that on the surface, the conflict may look like a struggle between the so-called Bangkok elites and the rural poor, which is common in any emerging democracy where you have social and economic inequalities that divide the people in the cities and in the rural area. But the current conflict is much more than that. There are issues of good governance, corruption, misuse of power, cronyism, and what they call arrogance of power that governs the current and the current anti-government forces. I think in any young democracy, I think sooner or later it will happen in democracies like Indonesia, in other newly emerged democracy. At one stage or another, popular politicians will come along. They will use populist policies to win the hearts and minds of the people. And they rise to power with that. And that's exactly what happened in Thailand. And once they're in power, they think they are on top of the world. They don't care about the rest, the other important components of democracy, like the checks and everything. So this should explain to you when the animosity between the opposing side, when they are ready to kill each other. So this is the point I would like to make, that with the populist leader in charge, this argument we always hear from them. In the case of Thailand, the present government won a landslide election with 15 million votes. That's quite impressive. So with 15 million votes behind them, how can you argue with them? That's the message. So who are these independent mechanisms of checks and balances? The Constitutional Court, the Anti-Corruption Commission, and the Human Rights Commission, who have been trying to do their job in keeping a check on the powers that be. But because they believe that they have the support, the mandate from the people through the ballot box, so these checks and balances to them are quite, insignificant. They don't have a good governance, and they ignore issue of transparency and accountability. And in the case, as I mentioned, in Thailand, they even see the mechanisms of check and balances as an impediment to what they call political progress. And yesterday is quite worrying, because there was a rally in northeastern Thailand where all the key leaders of the pro-government movement got together. And the message was quite frightening. They called on their supporters to rise up against independent mechanisms, including judiciary, because there will be a number of cases now. The no cases now lined up in the court, and one of the cases is directed against the Prime Minister herself. Is related to the controversial rice pledging scheme, which was a very, very successful political platform and was responsible for the landslide victory of the government. But on the other hand, it's also cost a lot of taxpayers' money because it's so unnatural. It's tantamount to a direct subsidy for farmers, and there have been loopholes for corruption which the government do not very much care about. And then the present powers that be have been very good at winning the support of the people through public policy, that they have been able to sell this very, very bad idea that all politicians are corrupt. So why don't you vote for politicians who are corrupt, yet they can deliver some benefits back to you. So it was quite a shame that there have been surveys in Thailand that have found that the majority of Thais, I don't know how they met the majority of the surveys, but the result have been that the majority of Thai people think that the corruption is okay as long as they benefit from it. And that's very quite dangerous if this mentality is allowed to go on. So this is a situation that has been going on in Thailand for the past several years, up to a point when corruption, the lack of good governance, came to a boiling point, and people started to believe that they have had enough of it. And that's why you see people are rising up. Of course, there are more factors behind this, but the major issue was the discontentment with the way things are, with the way that the ruling party has been running the country without transparency and accountability. So, what is the role of the media in all this? But before I answer the question, I would like to let you know a few interesting things that have been happening with the media in recent years. So these are some of the headlines that I have collected that reflect the challenges that the Thai media have been facing since Thaksin came to power 10 years ago. But this is exactly the same situation that we're still facing. These are the headlines. And I didn't write these things myself. Headline from a collection of newspapers. So, and this kind of pressure is still around. And when Thaksin was in power, it was very effective. He used both his political clout and his business power to view influence over how media report things. Not much different from running dogs. We call them circus dogs because circus dogs respond to what the master tell them to do in exchange for some biscuits or some loaves of meat. So this is what the media, certain sectors of media in Thailand describe themselves at the time. And I think the term is still relevant, these days. So this is also very interesting that we will be a journalist, so we know how important the word objectivity is. No, but along with the rising tensions at the moment, there are now demands from anti-government movement that the media should drop all pretense of being objective and jump on the bandwagon. And the interesting is that a lot of journalists, just take up the call because they believe in the cause of this anti-Thaksin movement. Of course, they are most, of course, educated middle-class people, and they share the feelings that the protesters have. And of course, outside Bangkok, there may be different ideas about what good governance is all about. As I mentioned earlier, that because of the success of the populist policies, I mean, a lot of people in rural areas are more than happy to overlook, I mean, the shortcomings of the government, the corruption or this abuse of power. So there's no neutral ground. That's what they say. And a lot of journalists also, I mean, respond to this call that no neutral ground is between good and evil, because they believe that what they're doing is for the good of the country. So the other side is evil. So the media can't stand in between. You have to jump on the side of the good. So I would like to. So this is. It's not easy. I mean, not to be attracted by the anti-Thaksin movement, because I would say the entire middle class in Bangkok, in other big cities, have become part of this movement. Journalists, I mean, they are by nature they are middle class people anyway. So the messages from this movement resonate quite well with them. No, but it's quite amazing. I mean, people, middle class people, lying up on the street, giving money to the protest leaders whenever he marches along, and these people march along the street. No, but at the end of the day, I would like to say that the media cannot take sides the way that many people are doing, because I believe that the media have even, especially within the present context in Thailand, the media the role of the media is even more important in trying to offer a voice of reason, because there have been so much noises of extremism, and I think the media, the mainstream media especially, I think still are in a position to really offer some voice of reason. And in long term, I think the media have the duty, a basic duty, to keep a check on politicians, especially populist politicians, to make sure that their populist policy do not get out of hand and are misused the way it has been in Thailand and some other countries. So this is, I think for Thailand, this is a turning point for the media. And I think it's very essential that they will re-examine what they're doing and try to set a new agenda for the mainstream media, so that they will play a role, I mean, in bringing the country out of the present crisis. Okay. So thank you. That's what I wanted to say for the moment.
Well, very interesting. Very interesting. That's Mr. Ted Chai Chong, the editor-in-chief for the Nation Multimedia Group. Now, after we heard little bit tension in our neighbor, close neighbor Thailand, we will be back to Indonesia. And thank you. Mrs. Uni Lubis will share with us her experience as a long and senior journalist, one of the senior journalists here in Indonesia, about how the newsroom manage the political somehow turmoil in Indonesia, and also deal with the issue of independency, the issue of sometimes journalist welfare. So you have 20 minutes time. So the time is yours, please.
Thank you, moderator. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, my colleagues, journalists, and also media experts. Indeed, very interesting to hear from Ted Chong about the development in Thailand. I said to him during our short conversation that I follow the news about the Thailand situation, not only from the media, including the newswire or Thailand media, but also from the Facebook of our ambassador, Indonesia ambassador, who is in charge in Bangkok, who very active, like more than 10 times a day, updating information. and also pictures. So you know that seeing is believing. So I can have like other source of information rather only based on the story covered by the media. Not only that, if I want to follow up about certain issue, I can just call him, and he can give because you know the proximity is matter in news. So one thing that I really want to know is about the Indonesian who live in Bangkok. That's something that our audience here in Indonesia really wants to know and care. So that's also a thing to become with my personal experience, that I really see the social media conversation and information become more and more important in influencing the discussion in editorial newsroom nowadays. I'm Twitter addicted journalist actually, and I work with that. But let's discuss that later. And I believe that the coming election will show the influence of the social media in shaping the public opinion, and also controlling the criticism toward the traditional media, mainstream media here in Indonesia, that from some of the public perception seen as more partisans, more less credible, because owned by the politician that also has ambition to become the presidential candidate, or become part of the success team of presidential candidate. As a transparency and disclaimer, I work for Antv as chief editor. This is my 8 years. And also just 4 months ago, asking by my friend, my colleague Suarjono there, the Secretary General of in the Independence Alliance journalist, as his chief editor in FIFA.co.id. One of, you know, this is true story. I mean, it wasn't Abu Rizal Bakri, the owner and presidential candidate, that asked me to become the chief editor of FIFA.co.id, but it was Nader, Wens, and Jono, you know, the founder of FIFA.co.id, and the owner have to say, okay, then. Okay, so that's I think that's the story. Another nuance of the situation where I work for. Antv and FIFA is under the Bakri Media Group, or the holding company named FIFA Media Group. We also have our sister company, 24-hour news channel TV1. So this is the transparency disclaimer. So you all know my standpoint, and I think that's why the organizer invited me to speak, because I believe there is a big question whether me and my team can work as a real journalist in the media company that owned by the businessman, is Indonesian Taksin kind of person. Yes, exactly. Taksin, you know, the quite successful businessman, the only native business empire that still exists until now is the 3rd generation, while other is already kind of like disappeared. So the other one is mostly the tycoon from the Chinese business conglomerates. So that's the first disclaimer. The second, I became the chief editor when I was 32 years old. It's in the oldest Muslim magazine in the country, Panji Masyarakat, founded by the late and great ulama of Indonesia, Buya Hamka. And we have this we call like commissioner, which is dominated by all these clerics, the respectful cleric from Al-Azhar, and all their family wearing hijab. And you can see that until now I never wearing hijab. I will never wearing that. Even though my husband came from the family that all of the women wearing the hijab. All my nephew wearing that. So until now I managed not to follow their path, and I'm doing okay. In family and
Boni, you have
yes,
two questions?
Short answer for Solihin. Sohirin. Do I support Abu Rizal Bakri as president? Okay, I will answer this. That's depend on who's the vice president that he will pick. So I mean, the choice now is
vote for the vice president.
The vice president, yeah. I mean, all the presidential candidate that eligible now is above 50, right? Megawati. I mean, the eligible is, I mean, the political party that potential can submit the candidacy, include in regard to the presidential threshold, according to our election law. Only two, Golkar and PDIP, based on the survey. So the other is just hopeful. Yeah? The other is just hopeful. So the only, until now, according to the survey, is only two political parties that potentially can submit their own presidential candidates. So my answer is depend on who's the vice president that picked by Pak Abu Rizal Bakri. I just want to add that the media landscape in Indonesia, the TV play very, very significant role. According to Nielsen, more than 90% media information consumption in Indonesia, how people consume get the information is more than 90% from TV. So TV still play a significant role. The second now is internet. Yeah. Last year, radio still on the second, which is 27%, and the internet 24%. But this year, I believe, and I think today the number is already internet is on the second as a source of information. That's why I believe that the next election is the internet, social media, citizen journalists, blog, whatsoever will play a bigger role, and that's good. I said to Tepchang that, you know, now we get criticism, the traditional media, all the media has interest, including the media that not directly owned by the political, but has like preference, but there are millions of public through the social media that will become that will support the balanced information. The power of the information from the public, I believe, will play a role, and I can sense every day how the social media control and evaluating us, monitoring us. Which news that they say, oh, this is FIFA Dr. framing. Too nice to Abu Rizal Bakri. How you always criticize Jokowi whatsoever. And that's become the source of evaluation. Also happened in Antv. Even though if you doing the analytical, more story about Jokowi than Abu Rizal Bakri. I mean, Jokowi is attracting the audience. and I have a KPI to attract the audience. Okay, so so I think this is very important and interesting. Then and also it's like become the bumper of us as a journalist. We can say that okay, we cannot do it. The public will criticize us. They will leave us because we leave. Because the public still believe that we still credible source of news. If not, they just leave us. Because now people has choices, not like in the new era, where mostly the media is kind of like controlling by one business power, or now even in TV there are three power that has their own preference for president. So there is a wisdom of crowd even in traditional media, and the wisdom of crowd will happen in the public sphere through the conversation in social media. So that's why I'm still optimistic, like Mas Andy Bayuni mentioned in the paper, that Indonesia will see interesting election that hopefully like what happened before, even though some of us will feel, oh, I elect SBY and then, but SBY is not bad during the first term, yeah, Mas Andy, like Soeharto during the 15 years first term. I mean, SBY is not bad during the first term. But then he created a lot of problem and trap with his own inner circle in the second term. So, but Indonesia is mature enough to pass through all this political turmoil, and I believe that the next election hopefully will pass kind of like quite honest. And hopefully we have better leader.
Okay, thank you so much. I know that some of you probably want to still discuss this very interesting issue, but given the time, and I also have a timekeeper from behind give me a sign, so I have to end this very interesting session. And thank you so much for Mr. Terchai and also Mr. Dewi. And I believe that all of us has learned very important issue. And now I will give back the forum to Pak Wisnu. What should I do? And
okay, actually,
after this, probably break or something. Yeah. Because I will not try to resume all the discussion. I think it's better to keep the, how do you call it, penasaran in English? Curiosity, yeah. The curiosity stays in your mind. Okay, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for two panelists. We give them applause again. Very good.
Thank you very much, Kun Eko.
Yes.
Kun Terchai and Kun Uni Lupis. Thank you very much. Yeah.
Everyone is good now.
Ya, semua harus kun. I think after this we still have one session for group discussion. But before that, we have time for break for 15 minutes, and then after that we come here to have group discussions. And for this group discussions, all of us have some questions. Every group in the table here, you have some questions that should be answered by each group. That's why we have group you all here. It's a table. There are people who cannot speak English or who cannot speak Bahasa and speak both. Who speak both English and Bahasa can help your friend to translate. Yeah, some questions. Okay, let's check. Oh, sorry, I'm wrong. Actually, now directly we have group discussions. No, directly you answer some question here. Okay, now everybody see the program here. Participants will discuss their experience in covering political crisis and election and identify challenges where they exist. Participants can also identify workable actions or strategies to address the challenges. Okay, this is our task right now, and there's 4 questions that should be answered by each group here. Now, your turn after several experts, editors speak in front of us, and now we all discuss here to answer these questions. We have time. Yeah, only until 3:30. Thank you. Any questions? I hope no. Yeah.
Jadi gimana pembagian?
Sudah di grup sini.
Oh, di grup sini.
Yeah. No need to move. Because we have group you, we put you in every table here, and now we discuss to answer these questions.
Tessa, you
okay.
Yeah, I know.
Langsung. Jadi kita grup ya.
Discussing ourselves. So first question, editors.
Break first or discussion?
Discussion directly, and then after finish, whoever finish first, you can have break.
Sorry, can I interfere in the process and just add on why we are doing this? Because it's also to give an opportunity for all of those to discuss a little bit more in detail some of the points that were raised by the panelists, but looking at your own newsroom or your own country. So we would very much appreciate if you have very clear examples of cases you have gone through in relation to political interferences in the newsroom, and what do you do as an editor or journalist to try and counter. That's why the questions are intended to ask, does this happen? Are there other kinds of interference? And what can you do particularly to defend ethical practices? So when owners or politicians come and say you have to do it this way, how have you reacted to that? And if you have any suggestions based on your own experience, because this is something we want to collect and share, because we know that questions are going to come from other countries as well. We are a small media, we don't have a lot of resources. How do we defend our integrity? And this is something we really want to hear your own experiences. So the questions are a guide, so hopefully you can refer to them to bring out your own examples and your own experiences. Is that okay with everyone? Bisa ya? So each group, if you can, you have one person sort of leading the discussion, and then later we will ask you to share from the groups as well. What are your findings? So those who have the speakers from earlier sessions, you can also help to give some inputs and just respond.
Maybe you can relate the discussion.
Kind of yeah. I'm angry.
Is that the conclusion?
No, but you see the difference. Looking at what you have shared in Malaysia, it is calls directly from the ministry. Okay, so one of the NUJ persons was saying recently on the radio that things have improved. We don't get as many calls as we used to before, but on a daily basis, they can be calls from the politicians, from the wives, from the and if they like they've been in cases in the past where if just say the bank employees union has a strike and the reporters by the time the reporters
watch election, help us improve government. For 2011 election, everybody supported even in it lasts so much and we admire so much so that they even I don't
using the what they call Nielsen tools to know what the people want, what the Nielsen respondents want. We can also apply it. And like I said, political
because in Thailand there are some
my association, even they give me like a representative for the press council number, but I reject because I want to run for the journal association. So the governments now just, I think the governments all the duties to control the press, like in the media section, so they give to the press council. But for me, sometimes even but their intention is very good. But now we face so many problems because, for example, one of the 5 journalists are now arresting. In that time, the government not contact with the press council. So they make their own ways, and then that's why our Myanmar Journalist Association and also 3 Journalist Association we try to make a statement, but we hired press council, so we complain to press council. Please, press council, please make it sure for the governments are now practicing with according to the law, because arresting the journalists without everyone know is like that a kind of action like the previous old regimes in that time. That's my opinion.
Do you want to?
In another question, maybe you can add.
Yeah, I'm Secretary of Press Council. So we are interim Press Council. The mandate of we founded the 2012. The mandate of the president. So yes, the Myomitai said we have one third of press council members are appointed by nominated by president office, and 2/3 is nominated by different association in media industry, like 3 journalist association, MGN, Myanmar Journalist Association, Myanmar Journalist Network, and Myanmar Journalist Union, and other Printing Press Association, Publisher Association, and Writers Association like that. So they nominated the representative of each organization to be a press council members. So 2/3 is journalists and media association members. So after that, our main objective or purpose is to draft the media law according to the function or duty of the assignment of Ministry of Information. So the second one is to promote the code of ethics of journalists. And third one is to solve the complaint, like the complaint committee. And fourth one is to prevent the journalists, and not to prevent, to look after or the journalists. So, but during the 1 year, in 2012 to now, we spent a lot to draft the law. We face a lot of problems and difficulties and confirmation with Ministry of Information, because the Ministry of Information tried to entirely control by the law. So they want to put some restrictions in some plots and some components in the media law. At the same time, they assigned to draft the media law to Press Council. At the same time, they secretly submitted to another printing and publishing law. This is a renew the registration of printing and publishing law in 1962. All journalists are arrested and by the law of 1962 for the time being, currently. So that's why we oppose the law submitted by Ministry of Information in the Parliament. So we face a lot of conversation and confrontation, and also disagreements, and so many meetings with Ministry of Information. So that sometime the Ministry of Information, when we founded the first day to implement the duty and function of Press Council, we got the complaint first came from Ministry of Information because they want to change their duty and responsibility to the Press Council. So, but we deny. So that's we are facing like that sort of problems in my country. But on the other hand, the ethically problems we are facing because under long time, I think 50 years, if half century under military regime, so that all people, including journalists, are victims of dictatorship. So we all have emotion, pressure, disappointment, so everything. So that whenever we face the problem and issue, the news, so we unconsciously approach to the problem emotionally. So because of we suffer a lot in the past. So that sometimes, not sometimes, every time journalists have bias to democratic forces, democratic parties. So they hate a lot to the old regime. So that in now, so you all know the change process in my country, democratization, or some scholars said not democratization, like the liberalization process. This is not democratization process. It's just liberalize. So change process, new government, but the new government are old regime of old members. So they are getting posts in every three powers: legislative, executive, and judiciary. So everybody's mostly are all members of regime. That's why they have all perspective, all behavior, all thinking ways. So that it's so difficult to deal with them, or to present as professional journalists and ethical journalists. So that's we are facing like that sort of education. In 2010 election, everybody know 2010 election. So the the sponsor of military government. But at that time, some newspaper and media simply supported the election process, including my media, because that's mean not supported to the regime. Just we supported to see a political process. So election is one of the political process to democracy. But we got a lot of accusation. We are pro-government and pro-gender at the time because people don't understand much what is the political process. Because lack of international standard education in old regime, people don't understand the political part. It's a political science and politics. What is the democracy? So we are threatened by, and that's 2010 election. We just simply supported the democratic parties. Those participated in 2010 election, because if they don't participate in 2010 election, USDP means a very beautiful names, Union, Solidarity and Development Party. That's founded by old regime. So they will dominate all seats of parliament. So we don't want to see like that. So that we supported democratic some parties to participate in 2000 election. So that at that time, so government threatened to us to not to report incorrect, because at that time the election, some main place the government cheated. So that we have no chance to report on paper, because we have to submit everything to the censorship. So we upload on the website. So if I explain a lot, it's very boring. We just sent the letter. The government complained to us. That's why you have to know that just complain. Not we sent order to do something to the media. So government complained like to us that some journal putting advertisements is not allowed. So we forward it. Just forward to them. Thank you.
Okay. Ada pertanyaan? Any question? Next. Kelompok Mas Andy.
Thank you. In our group, we discussed about the question of when journalists or editors are confronted for owners or advertisers. Not specifically about the election coverage, but I think it's just in general. I think one of the things that came up during the discussion is that quitting your job should be an option. That's and this is coming from experience. I think particularly Upi is. I just heard from Uni Lubis that he is a troublemaker. So, and the explanation is that we talk about trying to sensitize the owners, the advertisers about the good of practice of good journalism. It actually builds credibility and therefore helps with the bottom line, the business, the profitability. But I think from the experience that Upi was relating to us, and also Mawar is from Aji Jakarta, and Upi is from Aji Makassar. From the experience that they have gone through is, in most of the time, it's a choice between holding to our principles or bending it down and then agree to the demands of the owners. But I think when it comes to the first principle of the ethics in journalism, which is telling the truth, there is no compromise. We cannot compromise with the capital, the owners, and say, okay, we go with half truth. And when it comes to truth, I think it should be 100%. We have to stand by that. And that when that is not possible, I think that's the question when we have to decide about quitting, resigning from our job. I think some of our friends have done that. Today, I think with the internet, makes it a little easier because when you resign from a big media company, you have the option of, like what UPI and now are done, is set up their own portal. I think 15, 20 years ago this was not possible, but nowadays, if you want to practice journalism, you don't have to work for the big media companies. Actually, there is an option, and there are actual examples of where you can do this and you can practice good journalism, you don't have to bend the truth, and you live by the ethics that we believe in. And before I go to Marwan and Upi's success stories, just as examples, because there was a question about, okay, when there is a dispute between journalists and the owners, what happened? And I think in the case of Indonesia, a lot of our friends who have problems, they get support from AJI. And there was the case of our friend Lutfi. She's a producer, TV producer, program producer at Metro TV. She has had a problem with the management, with the owners, and she went to court and she won her case, but she didn't get her job back. Number one, because the owner owns the television station. She may have won the case in court, but she is not going to get her job back. So that's one case. And I think in Upi's own case, he had a case against the police at Metro TV. Again, he won the case, but of course he could not go back. He could not go back to Metro TV. So it's always, I think journalists will lose the case. We may win in court, we may win the moral argument, but I think at the end of the day, when we're dealing with the owners, they will win because they have so much money. And I think the case of Lutfi, the case went on for months and months. And I think she had the support of AJI and her friends to sustain her, which is good. But you should not have any illusion about winning your case against the big owners. And this is where Marwan and Upi have solutions for those people, for those who have problems, and that they have started their own portal. And Upi is running this portal in Makassar. He now employs, well, with himself there are 9 people running the portal, and he's not a little capitalist himself. And he has allowed an AJI union within his organization, so he's now dealing with the union. But he's actually part of the, he's a journalist owner of the media. It's small, but I think it gives me inspiration, ideas that it is possible. Same thing with Marwan. He has started what he calls a platform that allows people to have build contents. So what he has done is actually provide the technology, the platform, so anyone who wants to start their own syndicated news don't have to worry about the technology, because internet technology for people like me anyway is very complicated. But there is a place where we can turn to and then just worry about the content. Now the question is, okay, who's going to deal with the business aspect of the portals? And the answer is nobody. Because none of us are trained to be a businessman, and we are trying. I guess if you were good at business, we would be doing business in the first place, not journalism. But I think that's the challenge when you start your own media portal. You have to content. I think should not be a problem for most of us here, but I think technology and business can be a challenge. And I think Marwan was telling me the story of AJI Media Festival, which actually highlights success stories of people starting portals, and there's workshops, discussion, sharing of stories, of success stories, and that can be one way of helping friends who want to launch their own startup portals, whatever media they want to do. See? Sorry, I talked to them, but that's basically our story. Thank you.
Explaining. Ada pertanyaan? Tanggapan? Any question? Comment? Mbak Kaya? Tidak. Oke, kalau tidak, the next grup di belakang.
Thank you. I think because we are lucky because Pak and Bapak Andy already told us, and the reasons are more or less similar to us, so I don't have to tell very detail. We have the same problem and also answer to the next group. About the first, second, and the third question, I think it's similar. So if we talk about the rule and then the ideal system and so on, I think you don't have to be worried about in Indonesia. We have good pers council, we have a lot of boards, like even though KPI probably doesn't work effectively, but at least we have a lot of good bloggers, active bloggers, and so on. But the problem that we in our group consists with one blogger from Cambodia, Miss Kai, and then the rest are journalists. And luckily we are from Semarang and also from other city outside of Jakarta, so our position are more or less same. We are correspondents. You can call for a freelance correspondent. Freelance for the status, but working like full time. But you got wage like freelance. So you can imagine how difficult and hard our position. So if you ask the first question, how do editors and journalists handle difficulties? Unfortunately, not. So the question, one answer is we will quit, we resign, and Mas Latif previously from Antv. He worked under Mbak Uni Lubis, and he at the end chose to resign from Antv and move to Kompas TV. That he think it's more independent and non-partisan. Hopefully, I myself also have the similar problem like Antv, because when I work for Suara Merdeka, the owner, even though he doesn't involve in any political party, but the owner always choose which party that is stronger at the moment. So if this election time, general election time, it will be PDIP time, so I will choose PDIP. We will work to support PDIP. But if next time is time for a Democratic Party, then we will move to Democratic Party. So it really depends on the which one is stronger, that we can, in Javanese we call it nunut urip. I don't know what is it in Indonesia, what is it in English. And then besides resign, Pak Cahyono from Papua, he established Timika Post, and he has to choose to fight against the owner. The owner was politician from Golkar, a political party, and at the end, you can imagine whether the end of the story is the company stops, so all are fired, including him. Luckily, he's now working for AVP. And then the other option is also we choose to stay in our mass media, in our company, in our current company, but we have to make a deal. And I like the story of Jakarta Post, like what Pak Andy also Mbak Ati said to us, whether they kind of have negotiate the owners, because the owners is not only one, but also there are several owners. So this position is really good for Pak Andy and also Jakarta Post editor. But in local level, like Suara Merdeka and also other companies, unfortunately the owner is only one person or one company. So it's not easy for us to do dealing or negotiate. So what we have to do is in my and also Mas Habib experience, we take the job, we take the task that the editor said. You go to report Abu Rizal Bakri and his activities, or me, I have to report the activities of PDIP political party. I just come and I write the story, but probably I just wrote something short. Like I don't have to report very detailed. I don't have to write something detailed. But it's just to do what my editors wanted to do. So I don't have to follow what my editors say. And who are the main sources of threats? Of course, our owner, including the colleagues. So, like for example, the close friend of my owner, for example, have problems, and I report the case, but because it's related to the owner, he can directly report me to the owner. Especially in the election period, it's very easy for them to play, and at the end, it's very, even though it's not directly come to me, but for the journalists who are in the lowest level, like reporter and then editors, they are not free to behave or to write what they want, because if you want to report something that related to the colleagues or to the good friends of the boss, you have to think twice or even 1,000 times. And number 4, I think we have to do the strategy like what I told before. We have to make a deal with the editors, but we don't have to always do what the editor wants. So we take the job, but just write whatever we get. So we don't have to write something very detailed, or we don't have to write something very good. Like for example, probably in my situation in Suara Merdeka, it's difficult for me to write something very negative about the political party which my company supported. So what I do is, for example, you don't have to tell the truth about this. You don't have to tell always the good side of the company, the political party, but you can tell, even though not 100% negative, but at least writing something that is not very good. So I think as long as we write the case what the editor wants, I think it's okay. From us, it's just anyone wants to, maybe Cambodia. Mbak Atinya pulang.
Oh, udah pulang.
Iya. Terima kasih. Thank you so much.
Okay, any question? Tanggapan? Jika tidak, grup terakhir, silakan.
From Vietnam, ya, group 1 and group 2.
Oh, masih ada?
Masih.
Oh, ya ya. Mas Bambang?
Thank you. Members of the group from provinces.
So difficulties and challenges they face in some ways are quite different. Challenges that counterparts in big cities like Jakarta face. I think they all agree that the difficulties and challenges they face come mostly from the owners and local political parties. And to make things more complicated, there is always a connection between editors and owners with local political parties. So there has always been pressure on journalists at local level to report things the way that would be in favor of local parties, which is not quite different much from situation in many provinces in Thailand, where owners of local radio stations or newspapers may have their own political agendas or are connected to local political parties. So in terms of elections, they would certainly want to use their media as an instrument in their favor. And of course the challenges will be on the journalists who have to do reporting themselves, because there are times that they have to do reports the way that they believe are not professional, even in violation of the code of conduct. So the question is, what can they do? The same thing also happens at the national level. I'm not saying that it is confined only to local media. Even at the national level in Thailand, for example, there are journalists who are not happy with the way their owners and editors want them to cover news. And there have been some noises from journalists, but probably not strong enough to really make the owners or editors change their way of doing things. But new generation of journalists are much more skeptical and more ready to challenge the authorities, even within their own organizations. And I see that trend in Thailand getting more and more. And with the presence of social media, they can get their points of views across to a larger public when they have problems in their news offices. There was one very interesting case back in 2001, which was very classic, and it shows how certain groups of media handle this kind of situation. I was mentioning earlier about ITV. ITV was Thailand's first and only independent broadcaster before it was taken over by Kun Thaksin's family in 2000. So after taking over the TV station, and that happened just a year before the first general election that brought Thaksin to power. I mean, he had complete control on the newsroom, and then put everyone on notice that they want news coverage to be in his party's favor. But there were a group of about 20 news reporters and producers who believed that the policy was against the code of conduct, against their professionalism also. So what they did, they resisted. First, quietly, in a diplomatic way. But the pressure became harder and harder for them to resist. For example, when there were sort of political rallies for candidates to make speeches, the management would order the newsroom to send their crew to do right reporting to the rallies organized by the Thaksin party. And of course, this happened very often. So one day they decided they have had enough and wanted to bring this to the public. So they just were prepared to quit and challenge the orders and then publicize the problem they were facing. And it became a big story. And they all ended up being fired in mass. All the 23 of them altogether were fired. But the new owner of the TV station also suffered the consequences. Their credibility was greatly eroded because for the first time there were clear signs that the editorial department was no longer independent.
And from that point on, the news coverage was always questioned as to how credible it was. And so there was some give and take. I mean, if you decided to really challenge the authority and challenge this kind of behavior, then you had to be prepared and to lose your job. Even though that probably wasn't their intention in the first place. The intention was to inform the public that what they saw on the television screen wasn't really the real thing that should have been there. So just a very interesting case. And I think I agree with Andy that first of all, you shouldn't prepare to quit from the very beginning, and you have to try your best to make your point across, and at least to convince your editors and owners to reconsider their interference, because in the end, I think it's the credibility of the news organizations that is most important. So if they understand that and compromise, then that's probably the way to go. But in some cases, it's not that easy. The owners or the editors just don't care. They just want things done that way. So in that case, if you think you cannot go on working under such environment, I think you have to be prepared to quit and to go and work somewhere else where you can really do a better job as a professional journalist. And back to our friends from the provinces here, I think they all agree that it's not easy to stand up to local political parties and owners because of the physical proximity there. In the cities, the luxury of challenging powers that be and being safe in a safer environment. So but of course they still insist that there must be a fine line between ethics and interference by the owners or any other forces. And they believe that despite all the challenges they're facing, it's very important that there is proper training and education on ethics for journalists, because they really need to build new generation of journalists who understand the importance of code of ethics. And yeah, and that's roughly what the group have agreed on. Thank you.
Ada pertanyaan atau tambahan dari grup? Tidak ada? Pertanyaan? Oke, jika tidak, and the last group.
Actually, Thomas Parker is the speaker of our group. So he went outside, so he leave his notes to me. So he said he will be back soon.
He doesn't always.
Thomas and friend.
Actually, we discussed about it depend on the 4 questions. So, but other groups, situations and conditions, our groups is not very different. That's why mostly majority is Indonesian, journalists. So that's they are very common problems or situation. So that let me talk a little bit about my country reporting. For us, actually, I have already told you, explained you that about the situation and condition of my country. So, let's look back at the notorious government in 50 years. It tightly controlled everything, including the media. So, the media just abolished of the censorship. So, in 2010 election. So, the first question, how do editors and journalists handle difficulties encountered in reporting the election ethically? Yes, we have bias, as I already explained, talk about the bias about democracy and regime. So all journalists also victims of the regime. That's why they hate a lot to the old regime. So when they report the elections, so they bias to the democracy parties. So they oppose to the government-backed parties. So that it's very difficult to editors decide. The editor is very difficult to decide or edit some report because editors as well emotion and the bias to democracy. So that in 2010 election, but some media, they take care of the professionalism of professional media. They report just the process of the election. So they explain what's the election process. They explain, the biography of candidates. So, there's a few, but mostly a little bit biased to democracy. So that's in 2010, and it's different in 2012 by election. So because the 2010 election, the NLD made boycott. NLD means the lady, the Aung San Suu Kyi, boycott the election in 2010 election. That's why the mostly media, are reporting the sides of opposition together with the NLD and the lady. They report to the election is not fair. In practice, election is not very fair. It's some cheating in some areas. So at that time, the mostly reporting are biased. In 2012, the lady decided to participate in by-election. So the reporting system is totally changed. So mostly everybody supported to the NLD party, and they simply oppose to USDP party. So it's a totally change. So in 2010 election, reporting style and 2012 reporting style is totally changed. Mostly source. In second one, so who are the main sources of threats and political parties, election officers, voters, and other election stakeholders. So mostly in 2010, the threat came from government and some groups. The government secretly organized some bad guys. So they threatened to some voters and some media as well. In 2000, it's a different, totally changed in 2012 by election. So threatened by some of democracy, party members, and including in NLD members, because in 2012, NLD and the lady decided to participate in by election. They welcome to all people to be a members of NLD parties. So that some bad guys are also become NLD parties. So they, whenever the lady go to the campaign speech, and she usually go whenever she go to the campaign. So that some bad guys of members of the NLD are threatened to this crowd, and also they threaten to some media. So some media bias pro USDP and something like that. They threat to via online, and sometimes they telephone to the media office. So your newspaper is by pro government or something like that. They blame to the media. So sometimes your media office will be burned, will be fired, something like that. They threaten like that in 2012 election. And third one, how can editors and journalists resist owner interference and coverage? And so I'm the chief editor as well as and reporter director of my media. So in my country it's a little bit different with other countries. We have some private owned newspaper is apart from government and cronies, but after the press freedom and abolition of the censorship, some tycoons and cronies and some relatives of journalists and old regime, they publish weekly newspapers. So they purposely attack to the opposition sides. So, and their newspapers also, their publisher interfere to the journalists. But mostly papers, they can decide themselves. But because the journalists are very strong in my country, journalist association is very strong, especially young journalist association and journalist network, very strong. If they think that the government try to control the press freedom, they make the demonstration, they make the strike, even they boycott, they make the demonstration on the street. So that's very effective. So media owners cannot, interfere much in some media, except some, crony newspaper. Recently, they published after abolition of censorship. The last one: how can editors and journalists ensure fairness and accuracy in their reportage? This is hard to say. Sometimes the fairness and accuracy is. I think we have three own regulation. One is code of ethics. Second one is code of conduct. Third one is code of practice. So we have three self-regulation. It's totally depend on the professionalism and how to understand the basics journalism. So the third question and the fourth question is totally depend on the journalism and code of the three self-regulation. So we are facing that sort of problems, interference and accuracy and fairness, and for the time being, because every journalist have emotion. So, and also we have not proper journalism school for the time being. So we learned journalism from old generation, and some media organization gave the training for Myanmar journalists. So we are very beginning step to professional journalism training for the time. Some international organization trying to establish autonomous or independent journalism school, but now the Ministry of Information heard about that school, so they persuade to the donors. So they try to put the school under the control of Ministry of Information. But we have to discuss, we have to complete about that when we come back to the Yangon. So that's for example, currently Indonesian or Southeast Asian countries were hard about circumstance or conflict of the religious, so-called religious conflict in my country, some areas. So that's manipulated by some people who resist to the change process. So every countries have, every transition country has, for example, in Indonesia, so totalitarian regime to democracy. So that's, in every change process, it's all regime, some people who, got a lot of profits from old regime. So that they have resistance to the change. So that's why they secretly organize some groups, so to threat to the reformists. So in that case, so everywhere, every country, the most sensitive issue is ethnic and religious. Every totalitarian government, every dictatorship government try to, change this people interests to other place. For example, people interested in politics or people interested in 2015 who will be a presidential candidate. So they don't want to they don't want to see the interests of the people on that issue. That's why they move the interest of people to another place. So that is the way some mostly dictatorship use that sort of way. So in my country it's like that. So the so-called the religious affairs are so-called conflict because some so-called extremist groups create the problems in that areas, but not participate in all people in that there. So that's we are facing that. So that if someone who write about the religious conflict in for example in Rakhine area, for Bengali we call it Bengali there, but it's an international news agency called the Rohingya. But if we write about the sympathy to the Bengali or Rohingya, so-called Rohingya, so we some extremist Buddhism, extremist Buddhism, they were threat to the media. You guys are pro-Bengali, so your media will fire, something like that. So it's very difficult situation because behind them, someone are controlling or manipulating. So that our transition country is very difficult to deal with the problems and hardliners, so-called hardliners and let's say conservative. So that's why we have to learn. We have to learn from neighboring countries like the Thai, not for the time being not Thai, from Indonesia, especially Indonesia and other Asian countries. South Korea. South Korea is not very different with Indonesia and my country. So Suharto regime and Ne Win regime, same. So that the journalists also, we want to learn from Indonesian journalists. Please teach me. Thank you.
Thank you. Any question?
Terima kasih. Saya punya pertanyaan buat Mr. Kwang. Apakah media di sana juga memberitakan secara netral dan independen terhadap kasus-kasus kekerasan terhadap Rohingya dan mereka tetap netral terhadap isu ini? Terima kasih. Please translate.
Please translate.
Yeah, whether media in your country also cover the violence cases connected with Rohingya.
Sorry, please say it again.
Yeah. Whether media in your country also cover the Rohingya cases where violence, especially towards the Rohingya people there.
For our media, so when we decide to cover about that problems in Rakhine area, so that we sent our own reporter, but even though we have a regional reporter, because we very difficult to get another side, opposition side, let's say Rohingya or Bengali sides. So it's very hard to cover because people government also manipulate, and also people have a little bit feeling not very happy to deal with them. So that's why the all media is a little bit biased, But the real situation is very different with the some international news agency cover about that situation. Because whenever they ask me that what's the condition of the Rohingya or Bengali, so I told them, please come to my country, so you can go there, so you can see practically what going on there. So that I think the problem and is only the Rakhine state. Is any other state have not like that sort of problem? But is related problems of the religious that already occurs in other cities. So I think your question and my answer is related or not? I don't know. It's very difficult to answer.
Yeah.
Another question? Okay, so I have no right or authority to make conclusion because the result of discussion will be bring to the next session. So I think time is running out. We close the session and I give back the stage to Pak Wisnu. Silakan Pak.
Thank you very much. Yeah, actually we finished our activity at 4:45, but we still have one session for formulating the statements, but the teams now are still working, and hopefully tomorrow we can complete the statement. And that's with a quick conclusion for this day discussion. That I cannot conclude, but the teams here try to formulate from the discussion since the first session. We have panelists that give us some few experience from the Cambodia elections, and then Malaysia elections, also how Indonesian media prepare the election right now. From Malaysia, for instance, we have some experience how media with English and Bahasa or Malay language doesn't provide accurate and fair coverage. That is one condition there. And internet media is increasing, but the ruling coalition is still capable of adapting to the shift. Only time will tell whether entropy or stasis will prevail. And from Cambodia, we also learned how state media improve, but private media owned by the ruling parties, cronies, doesn't work well, and the speaker suggests the importance of board of advisory body for media that can help to improve the media, both independent or maybe private media that become the streams media there. But the speaker from Indonesia, Ibu Ati, also suggests that since media is run as business, the business principle guide the media to become more ethical. Since more ethical media will get more credibility and therefore more traffic. And then from the
afternoon sessions, we also get some the important things from the afternoon session. When I ask somebody, what's the most important idea or view or experience from Thailand?
Dia mendapat hibah 200 juta misalnya untuk event, kegiatan, seminar misalnya, dia masih bisa mengajukan proposal ke masing-masing perusahaan. Jadi praktis kegiatan itu di-cover oleh sponsorship dari perusahaan-perusahaan. Sementara dana yang tadi masih ada. Kalau terus kita ke soal bagaimana dengan tahun politik ini, dengan pemilu, ya. Jadi sekarang ada pemahaman yang keliru di lingkungan jurnalis di daerah adalah musim kampanye, musim pemilu adalah musim menuai amplop. Karena semua kandidat anggota DPRD, boleh dari daerah maupun sampai provinsi maupun sampai pusat, berlomba-lomba menjadikan media lokal ini sebagai sarana kampanye. Bisa dipahami karena kalau beriklan di media sangat mahal, sehingga dia mau pakai jalan praktis bagaimana pemberitaan aktivitas dia diberitakan. Selain itu ada apa? Kebanggaan sendiri kalau misalnya dia dipublikasikan sebagai berita bukan sebagai iklan. Itu prestis tersendiri bagi kandidat. Sehingga dia berlomba-lomba bagaimana caranya dengan membeli jurnalis, kampanyenya bisa terekspos dengan baik. Ingat, di Jawa Tengah saja ada 20.000 calon anggota legislatif, baik tingkat provinsi, DPD, kabupaten, sampai pusat. Ada 20.000. Mereka semua berlomba-lomba. Nah, pendekatannya tidak hanya kepada jurnalis, tapi juga kepada newsroom. Bagaimana misalnya dia mendekati chief editor, pimret, atau newsroom yang lain, anggota newsroom yang lain untuk melakukan pendekatan itu. Biasanya kompensasinya adalah iklan, jelas iklan. Nah, misalnya kalau kita mengenal nama Juliari Batubara, calon DPR RI PDIP dari Jateng 1, itu setiap hari pasti dimuat di Suara Merdeka karena dia setiap hari pasang iklan. Tidak hanya pasang iklan saja, tapi pemberitaannya juga luar biasa. Ada juga misalnya saya tidak bisa membayangkan misalnya teman-teman jurnalis di Semarang atau di daerah lain yang misalnya dia bekerja untuk Sindo koran, bagaimana harus aktivitas Haritanu dan Wiranto harus diekspos luar biasa. Demikian juga dengan grup-grup yang lain. Di Suara Merdeka memang tidak bersinggungan langsung dengan itu karena ownersnya tidak terlibat langsung sebagai politisi ya. Tapi dengan alasan yang lain, dia akan mendukung beberapa koleganya pengusaha yang juga pengusaha untuk dibuat luar biasa. Dulu memang pemilu 2004, pemilik Suara Merdeka Budi Santoso mencalonkan diri sebagai anggota DPD. Dampaknya luar biasa, mulai pimret sampai loper koran semuanya dikerahkan untuk kampanye Budi Santoso. Ini karikatur ilustrasi, salah satu ilustrasi untuk cover buku Aji soal independensi newsroom yang awal Februari akan dilansing. Semuanya uang. Oke. Tahun 2009 ada salah satu koresponden TV di Semarang, saya sebut Antv, cerita kepada saya. Pada 2009, musim kampanye 2009, dia bisa mendapatkan amplop kampanye itu 20 juta. Untuk media lokal seperti Suara Merdeka yang sangat berpengaruh di Jawa Tengah, angkanya bisa lebih dari itu. Biasanya sekali kampanye itu kalau DPR RI antara 300 sampai 500 ribu. Kalau DPRD Jateng paling 300 sampai 500. Ada juga yang sampai 1 juta, ada sampai 2 juta. Karena ini juga gengsi dari calon DPR-nya. Dengan kondisi yang demikian, saya tidak bisa berharap banyak bahwa kode etik akan bisa ditegakkan dengan baik di Jawa Tengah, khususnya di Semarang. Karena menurut saya problemnya adalah satu amplop, yang kedua mereka juga tidak paham dengan etika jurnalistik. Tapi kita tetap tidak boleh sepakat, tidak boleh hopeless ya, bahwa menurut saya kuncinya adalah ini. Kita tidak, menurut saya independensi sebagai seorang jurnalis adalah pilihan. Kita tidak ada lagi pembenaran bahwa bisa menerima amplop ketika gaji rendah, tidak bisa. Akhirnya ini menurut saya adalah pilihan hidup, pilihan sikap ya, tidak bisa itu. Bagaimana kita dengan privilege yang kita miliki itu ada hak-hak publik di sana, sementara kita akan melacurkan begitu saja. Nah, ini pilihan, saya kira ini pilihan. Okay. Dan saya kira yang hadir di sini teman-teman Haji seluruhnya, saya kira sepakat itu bahwa akhirnya memang kita sering pada diskusi kelompok di Haji itu adalah bahwa kita selalu ngomong, kejujuran dalam mentaati kode etik harus dibayar dengan kesederhanaan. Ya. Kalau kita mau berpegang teguh pada etik, ya hidup lurus-lurus saja, hidup yang sederhana. Tapi kembali lagi tidak bisa berharap banyak, kecuali kalau kita secara ekonomi kita bisa mapan. Nah, pilihannya adalah kita harus membuat side job, kerja sambilan, agar kita bisa menutupi kekurangan kebutuhan tadi. Yang 1,8 juta, yang mestinya 3,2 juta itu harus kita tutupi dengan usaha kita sendiri, bukan dari amplop. Nah, banyak praktek-praktek yang sukses. Contoh-contoh yang sukses, misalnya beberapa teman di Semarang ada jadi dosen tamu di perguruan tinggi ngajar komunikasi misalnya, ada yang menjadi penulis, ada menjadi editor buku, ada yang praktis lagi malah, ada yang menjadi ada yang jadi peternak susu perah. Saya sebut misalnya Ardiansah itu koresponden Metro TV. Dia berawal dari 3 sapi, sekarang sudah 13 sapi. Ya. Yang lain melakukan itu, ada yang ternak bebek. Ya. Saya sendiri ya kebetulan sama istri juga punya usaha kecil lah, buka toko hijab gitu ya. Saya bukan penganjur jilbaber, itu bukan, tapi saya memanfaatkan tren itu. Tren orang-orang Indonesia suka pakai jilbab Mbak Renjani itu, kita manfaatkan. Ternyata luar biasa. Tapi yang harus diingat ya, penghasilan dari side job ini memang terkadang itu lebih besar dari penghasilan saya menjadi koresponden Tempo. Bisa 2 kali lipat, bisa 3 kali lipat, tergantung arah angin ya. Nah, yang tidak boleh kita lupa adalah kita jangan lalai ketika kita bisa eksis secara ekonomi, maka kehidupan jurnalismenya itu ditinggal. Itu yang nggak benar menurut saya. Karena kita sudah komit, jurnalis itu menjadi pilihan kita. Nah, dulu kita sering ngomong ini, Mas, kamu jangan terima amplop dong dari jurnalis. Kalau memang jurnalis tidak bisa menghidupi kamu secara ekonomi, kamu harus keluar dari jurnalistik. Saya kira pilihan itu tidak terlalu bijak menurut saya. Karena kalau kita mempraktikkan itu secara hitam putih, kalau dunia jurnalistik tidak bisa menghidupi kamu secara layak, kamu keluar, yang terjadi adalah koran-koran baru ini diisi oleh jurnalis-jurnalis baru yang juga tidak paham. Nah, jadi kita tetap harus menjadi jurnalis, harus tetap taat kode etik, tapi secara ekonomi kita tidak kalah dengan mereka. Itu memang tantangan. Pertanyaannya adalah, Mas, apakah Anda tidak akan meninggalkan jurnalistik kalau Anda sudah mapan? Saya nggak yakin Anda akan memperjuangkan itu. Nyatanya kita bisa memperjuangkan itu. Ya, kalau yang side jobnya adalah urusan-urusan praktis, misalnya toko, sapi, ya jangan dikerjakan sendiri. Kita bisa meng-hire orang. Kita hanya manajerial aja. Ya. Alhamdulillah saya misalnya bisa mengerjakan 2 mahasiswa. Mahasiswi. Yang usaha-usaha besar kayak ternak sapi itu sampai 7-10 orang bisa dikerjakan. Liputan tetap liputan. Ya. Dan jangan lupa, menurut saya kita harus layak secara ekonomi dan mandiri, tapi jangan lupa pemilik media itu juga harus bertanggung jawab atas perbaikan nasib jurnalis. Saya ingin pengakuan dari teman-teman. Teman-teman aji di daerah, kalau demo-demo soal hak buruh ini, saya kira pasti yang lebih aktif adalah teman-teman koresponden, teman-teman yang secara ekonomi juga ada waktu, terus secara ekonomi tidak terlalu bergantung. Saya tidak bisa membayangkan misalnya kasus di Semarang, anak yang demo menuntut buruh, menuntut perusahaan membayar saya adalah anak-anak wartawan organik, Suara Merdeka misalnya. Nggak bisa. Karena dia punya konflik kepentingan dengan perusahaannya. Ancamannya dia kalau macam-macam akan dikeluarkan. Saya ingin menegaskan bahwa jurnalisme, kehidupan jurnalis di Indonesia yang sehat itu berhutang budi pada sosok-sosok seperti kita kayak ini. Kan mestinya industri jurnalisme yang menghidupi kita, tapi kita justru terpanting-panting untuk menjaga agar ini tetap independen. Saya kira itu untuk bahan diskusi. Terima kasih.
Ya, terima kasih Mas Sahirin. Ya, waktunya sudah lewat banyak, Mas. Okay, Mr. Sahirin just try to share his experience together with his group, with Aji Semarang, how to keep their commitment as a journalist, even though with their difficulties in their problem with salary, wage, and support, but the law wage should not justify the bribery. This is, and he gave a solution with the side jobs. Maybe this still debatable, and we can discuss about this, whether this is the best solution. I think, yeah, this. But before we discuss about this matter, let's go to our friends from Burmese, from Burma, this Burmese Chief Editor, Mr. Jo Min Swe, and also together with the media owner, Mr. Myo Min Thai. Both can share how a media owner and also editor-in-chief can support
pemilihan umum lokal di Jakarta, menyelenggarakan survei terhadap, kalau tidak salah, 4 media cetak nasional, 4 media cetak lokal, 4 media radio, 4 televisi, dan 4 online. Apa yang tercatat atau yang ditemukan, di atas 50%, bahkan seingat saya sudah mendekati 80%, media membuat pemberitaan yang sangat tidak seimbang. Ini tentu saja hanya salah satu, ditemukan banyak pelanggaran-pelanggaran lain yang seharusnya dipenuhi agar mencapai pemberitaan yang kredibel. Yang kedua, saya baru saja bertemu Pak Stanley, Dewan Pers, bahwa pengaduan yang disampaikan oleh masyarakat terhadap Dewan Pers atas perasaan mereka terlanggar itu mencapai 700-an, naik hampir 2 kali lipat dibanding tahun sebelumnya. Ini data tahun 2013. Baiklah, Pak Sohirin, mohon bantuannya. Ini tentang pemilu yang akan berlangsung di Indonesia. Mungkin salah satu simbolnya yang banyak beredar di masyarakat. Dan lanjut, ini gambar suasana masa kampanye pada pemilu-pemilu sebelumnya. Ya, bagi saya, ketika berbicara mengenai bagaimana meliput pemilu, kita hanya dalam tanda kutip memerlukan 3 prasyarat awal. Di belahan bumi manapun, pemilu akan menghasilkan pemberitaan yang kredibel jika sang jurnalis peliput pemilu bersama medianya telah memiliki 3 prasyarat. Pertama, memiliki kesadaran yang melekat pada dirinya bahwa jurnalis bekerja untuk kepentingan publik dengan segala prasyaratnya. Kedua, menguasai pengetahuan dan pemahaman tentang seluk-beluk semesta pemilu dan praktik pelaksanaannya. Ketiga, memiliki strategi yang memadai dalam meliput pemilu yang baik dan selalu kembali kepada hal yang paling esensial terkait dengan profesionalisme. Nah, tadi saya menyebut kalau kita berbicara mengenai kepentingan publik, maka jurnalis saat melakukan tugas peliputan itu hanya diperlukan untuk kembali ke standar jurnalisme dan kode etik. Hanya kembali ketika persis seperti mereka baru memasuki dan mengikuti, baru memasuki pekerjaan sebagai jurnalis dan mendapatkan pelatihan-pelatihan yang standar itu. Untuk mempermudahnya, para jurnalis cukup kembali kepada 9 plus 1 elemen jurnalismenya Kofak. Sangat cukup, itu sudah sangat cukup. Ya. Mengapa standar atau prinsip jurnalisme yang universal? Kepada 2 hal itu kita harus kembali. Jurnalis bagi saya merupakan dunia profesi berbekal idealisasi dan pengetahuan empirik selama ratusan tahun. Ya. Para pelakunya telah mengembangkan metode kerja dan aturan main serta merumuskannya. Lalu lahir dan tumbuh sejumlah prinsip yang kemudian menjadi pegangan universal. Bahwa pertama-tama Tuhannya adalah fakta. Jadi hanya dan hanya menyajikan fakta. Bahwa dia nanti menjadi sebuah fakta sosiologis atau fakta psikologis, itu soal interpretasi berikutnya. Kemudian meliput dari berbagai sisi. Tidak hanya 2 sisi, tetapi dari berbagai sisi. Bukan hanya cover both side, tetapi all side. Lalu menjaga independensi, kemudian menjaga imparsialitas, bersikap jurdil. Ini saya terjemahkan dari fairness. Saya kira pemilu tepat ya, karena fairness tidak hanya dipahami sebagai adil, tapi juga jujur. Ya. Memagari akurasi, kemudian memiliki disiplin verifikasi, serta mematuhi secara mutlak kode etik, dan kalau perlu sudah ada code of conduct-nya dan code of practice-nya yang mematuhi itu secara mutlak saja. Untuk kode etik, saya kira bisa diringkas supaya mudah memahaminya. Pengalaman saya melakukan uji kompetensi di sekitar 50% dari 25 kota, itu kawan-kawan sering bingung untuk menguasai pasal-pasal yang ada dalam kode etik karena tidak